Rinzi. They were climbing without oxygen. Below the summit, the Sherpa turned back. It had become too complicated. Bristow continued alone. At 11:10 a.m., he made contact. He was at approximately 8,500 meters and continuing his ascent. By evening, on April 20th, at around 6:10 p.m., he reported that he was standing on the summit. He was the first Bulgarian to reach the summit of Everest, alone, without oxygen. He found empty oxygen tanks on the pyramid, with a flag nearby. He tore off a small piece of the flag. He left a small camera at the summit. Many did the same. It is a sign for those who follow and proof that you were really at the top. Next came the descent. Bristow did not take the more familiar route around the mountain. He turned around and descended along the same west ridge. At 9:10 p.m., he said briefly over the radio that it was too dark, and he would spend the night right on the ridge, without a tent, without oxygen, at an altitude of about 28,000 feet. Those below understood that this was extremely dangerous, but in the dark, taking another route was also risky. Waiting for daylight was the only option. In the morning of April 21st, his voice could still be heard. It was weak and some words were indistinguishable. There is an important detail. Bristow may have had problems with his gloves. At such an altitude, fingers quickly become numb, making it difficult to press the radio button or perform any hand movements. By 5:30 p.m., communication was still possible, but poor. At 7:45 p.m., the last click was recorded. After that, there was silence. On the same day, Lyudmil Yankov climbed to the top. He rose very high to about 8,500 meters, but found no trace of Bristow. He spent the night at about 8,400 meters, also without proper shelter. During the night, the weather deteriorated. A storm began higher up. It became clear that the risk now affected more than just one person. Anyone who went further might not return. It was at this moment that the phrase we began with was uttered below. The entire team could be lost at the top if the rescue continued at all costs. Let's break down April 20th step by step. This is important for understanding why everything happened the way it did. 5:45 a.m., start of the assault. The weather is clear but cold. They are going without oxygen. On a difficult section, the Sherpa turns back. Bristow is left alone. 11:10. Communication from an altitude of about 8,500 meters. He is keeping pace and continuing the ascent. By evening, the summit. Message at about 18:10. Bristow spends about half an hour at the summit. He finds empty oxygen tanks and a flag. He takes the torn piece with him. The camera stays on the pyramid. These details.
I'm an angel. See the wings? Good fortune is. Yeah, it's amazing. It's really good. Good fortune is.
Perfect. Always ain't it all.
Good fortune is. Nice! Good fortune, rated R.
Known for pursuing your passions. No one wants to be known for cancer, but a treatment can be. Keytruda is known to treat cancer. FDA approved for 18 types of cancer, including certain early stage and advanced cancers. One of those cancers is early stage non-small cell lung cancer. Keytruda may be used with certain chemotherapies before surgery when you have early stage lung cancer, which can be removed by surgery.
Takes the torn piece with it. Camera stays on the pyramid. These details will later be confirmed. Camera and the piece of the flag will indeed be retrieved by other members of the expedition in May. These are essential pieces of evidence. They will show that Bristow was on the summit and at what time. The descent is along the west ridge, not along the normal route, where there are more tracks and railings. At 9:10 p.m., Bristow reports, "It is dark. He is staying at the bivouac." What does this mean in simple terms? It means spending the night right on the ridge, exposed to the wind at the altitude of the death zone. There is no tent, there is no oxygen, the temperature is low. At such an altitude, the body quickly loses strength. Hands freeze, fingers don't work correctly. Any simple action is a problem. But at that moment, he had a choice between two bad options. Go blindly along an unfamiliar route or wait for daylight and see the terrain. He chose the second option. At base camp, people shouted desperately into the microphone, "Izo, you are a strong man. Don't fall asleep. You're Bulgarian." In one of his last messages, Protonov said, "I don't see anyone who could save me." The last contact was at 7:45 p.m. A single click of the radio switch was heard on the air, and then there was silence. He was still alive, but he couldn't speak anymore. Lyudmil Yankov was climbing parallel with him. He rose very high, but saw no traces. At such an altitude, traces can quickly be covered. The snow is thin, and the wind blows away any traces. Yankov had to spend the night at about 8,400 meters. The place was uncomfortable and windy. In the morning, the weather finally broke. The storm destroyed the platforms and tore apart of the railings. This meant that it was impossible to continue the active search. Any new attempt to climb up at that moment would lead to new losses. Why didn't Bristow follow the usual route to the South Saddle? This is a common question. The answer is simple. At night, without railings and people, crossing over to another route is just as risky as descending along the ridge. There are also cornices and wind there. It is easy to miss the right edge and fall. Bristow had no tent, no oxygen tank, and no support from above. Waiting for daylight was an understandable decision. By the evening of April 21st, it was clear that there would be no immediate rescue. The weather would not allow it. Any attempt would lead to new problems. The camps at the top were damaged. At base camp, they switched to a different plan. Keep the people safe, wait out the storm, and, if a new window opened, rebuild the upper part of the roof. It sounds harsh, but it is the only solution when there is a storm at the top and the camps are destroyed. Let's note the critical risk factors that came together at the same time. The first is the late hour at the summit. At 6:10 p.m., it is already close to dark. The second is the descent along the West Ridge, where there is little shelter. Third, the lack of oxygen. Fourth, spending the night without a tent at an altitude of about 8,500 meters. Fifth, the deterioration of the weather. Any of these factors alone is dangerous. Together, they produce the result we see. Person missing with no possibility of organizing an immediate rescue. Many people think that Bristow Prodanov's disappearance on Everest is some kind of mystery, but in fact, everything can be explained logically and simply. The body was not found, and here's why. First, the West Ridge, which he was climbing, is not a well-traveled route. It is a complex open area with cliffs and cornices. If a person fell, they could be carried hundreds of feet down to a place where no one goes. On popular routes such as the South Pole, many people notice and report traces, but here the flow of climbers is small, and chance finds are rare. Second, the weather at 28,000 feet quickly destroys traces. Wind, snow, frost, and that's it. No marks from crampons or equipment remain in a couple of days. GPS didn't exist back then, nor did radio beacons. If Bristow strayed from the route, it would have been almost impossible to find his tracks. Thirdly, after April 21st, a severe storm began. It destroyed camps 4 and 5, tore ropes, and made the ascent dangerous. Lyudmil Yankov climbed high, but was forced to descend due to deteriorating weather. For several days, no one could go up. Everyone sat in tents lower down the slope. Searching in such conditions was unrealistic. Fourth, when the weather improved on May 1st, the team first had to restore the route, re-establish camps, haul food, gas, and oxygen. This was a lot of work that took a significant amount of time. A search hot on the trail became impossible, and the expedition switched to a new plan to complete the ascent and collect at least some data. Fifth, Bristow's route along the West Ridge is not a well-trodden path. It is a rare line without the usual bivouacs and railings. If something happened at night, it's hard to pinpoint exactly where. The result, the body was not found due to the challenging route, storms, wind, lack of technology, and destroyed camps. There is no mystery here, only the harsh reality of high altitude, where searching is almost impossible. When the storm subsided and the sun came out, the Bulgarian expedition started all over again. By May 1st, the weather allowed them to work. The team rebuilt Camp 4, then Camp 5, and brought food, gas, oxygen, and equipment for those who would go to the summit. The goal was clear: to reach the summit of Everest and collect clues that would help understand what had happened before. On May 8th, at 3:20 a.m., Metodi Savov and Ivan Volchev left Camp 5. There was a lot of snow, knee-deep in places, and they walked slowly but steadily. At 5:15 p.m., they reached the summit. They descended via an easier route, the southeast ridge, where there were more people and a better chance of getting help. At an altitude of about 29,000 feet, they had to spend the night without a tent or oxygen. Savov's feet were frostbitten, and he was running out of strength. But lower down, they were met by an Indian expedition, which gave them oxygen, a tent, food, and medicine. This saved their lives. On May 9th, Nikolai Petkov and Kirill Doskov set off from Camp 5 for the summit. They climbed very quickly, reaching the top in 7 hours and 38 minutes. At the summit, they found the camera that Bristow had left on April 20th and a piece of the flag. These findings are necessary evidence. They confirm that Bristow was at the summit at the specified time. This answers the questions. Did he reach the summit? When did he do so? And did he leave any traces? Petkov and Doskov descended via the southeast ridge, met Savov and Vilcha, and with the help of the Indian team, all four safely left the death zone and returned to the lower camps. In the end, the Bulgarians made the traverse. They climbed the rugged west ridge and descended the easier southeast ridge. This is an excellent achievement in the history of Everest. The camera and flag from the summit proved that Bristow had been at the top, and the traverse showed that the team was able to complete the route despite the storm fatigue and dangers. After the descent, Savov was taken to Kathmandu due to frostbite. The rest left the mountain. The expedition was over. The reports are simple: dates, times, who went, what they found, who helped. But these facts, the discoveries on the summit, the assaults on May 8th and 9, the help from the Indians, remove all unnecessary speculation. The team was welcomed in Bulgaria as national heroes, and Prodanov was posthumously awarded the highest honor. But after the fall of communism in 1989, these honors were revoked, and the surviving heroes felt forgotten, left with meager pensions. This story has a tragic sequel. In 2004, on the 20th anniversary of her uncle's death, his niece Mariana Prodanova-Maslarova attempted to climb Everest herself. She died at an altitude of 29,000 feet, almost exactly where Bristow disappeared. For 40 years now, no one has repeated the Bulgarian route along the cruel path. The mountain keeps its secrets, the body of Hristo Prodanov, and the echo of the radio call begging the national hero not to fall asleep. This is a story about what it takes to reach the top of the world and the terrible price that sometimes has to be paid for the desire to achieve what no one else has achieved. That's all, friends. Write your opinions in the comments, give us a thumbs up, and see you in the following video. Bye for now. Bye for...
He has an open lane and makes his move. He might, he could, he did reach for his M&T Bank Ravens debit card. Oh, what a play! And a completion!
Good eye.
Get your M&T Ravens debit card and make every tap feel like a touchdown. Score yours at mtb.com/Ravens.
Alrighty, folks, a transformative deal in the Middle East brokered by the Peace President Donald J. Trump will go through all aspects of it. Plus, Hassan Piker gets himself in trouble for maybe shocking his dog on camera. David. And Katie Porter walks out in an interview. So, a lot going on. First, Daily Wire premieres for new series, U.S. spread before 9/11. The untold story of how 17 American sailors were killed, dozens more wounded, and how Washington brushed it off as a criminal at
Alaska is a land where natural beauty coexists with the abyss, and beyond every horizon lies something that humans cannot explain. Here among mountain ranges, permafrost, and icy rivers, people disappear as if they had never been there. No signs of a struggle, no bodies, no questions, and what happened. Official reports wildly attribute the disappearances and accidents to storms. They say that something lives in these lands that does not obey the laws we know. Today, we'll tell you about 3 disappearances, each of which defies logic and common sense. These stories have unexplained findings, a complete lack of traces, failed the perception of the We begin in January 1992 when experienced trapper Leslie Jonathan set out on his usual three-day frozen Delta Creek and was never seen again. January 28, 1992. Alaska rain takes Paso. The air is so cold it burns your lungs. The temperature hovers around minus 14.8 degrees Fahrenheit. For Leslie Jonathan, this wasn't a job, it was a way of life. At 45, he was a trapper through and through, one of the few who still lived by the old ways of Alaska. He wasn't a tourist or an employee in uniform. He was a trapper whose family had been doing this for generations. These mountains and rivers were his home. He could read tracks like others read books, predict the weather by the color of the sky, and knew the habits of every animal. That morning, he set out on his usual three-day route along the trails to check his traps for marking beaver and frozen Delta Creek. He had done this hundreds of times. He had a team of 6 strong proven Malachites on a sled loaded with everything. Not for protection. He had an agreement with the Park Service station to check in on the radio every few days just to let them know he was up. It wasn't a requirement, but a precaution taken by all the local rangers. He was supposed to check in on the evening of January 30th, but the radio was silent. It was silent on the 31st, and on February. At first, there was no panic. These things happen in the night. Blizzards, radio malfunctions. But Jonathan was known for his responsibility. He could get in touch anywhere. By February 3rd, his closest neighbor, who lived 50 miles away, and the Park Service coordinator realized that something was wrong. On February 4th, after 2 days of no response on the radio, a National Guard helicopter was sent to fly his presumed crew. Searching from the air in such conditions is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Endless white plains, cliffs, dense fir forests. The pilot and observer scanned the area for hours. Then, closer to noon, they spotted it. A dark spot on the dazzling white blanket of the frozen valley through which Delta Creek meandered. As the helicopter descended, the scene that met their eyes defied logical explanation. It was Jonathan's sled. It stood right in the middle of a vast open, icy space. 6 dogs, still harnessed, lay huddled together in the snow. They were alive, but looked exhausted and frightened. The helicopter landed at a distance, and 2 rescuers made their way to the sled.
If I were him, I'd bundle my home and auto and pick up the real quick for the savings.
Are you talking about bundling?
No, bundle, Dan. Bundle.
Bundle and save with a personal price list. Like a good neighbor, safety and save. The most basic of human necessities. Water flows through it.
Way to the sled. There was not a single human footprint within dozens of feet of the sled and dogs. Not one. The snow was pristine, except for the dogs' paw prints and the sled runners, which led here and then broke off. It looked as if Leslie Johnson had vanished from the sled. A closer look raised more questions than it answered. The sled was fully equipped. Food supplies, fuel for the book, a sleeping bag, a tent. Everything was in place, neatly tied down. His rifle was in a case strapped to the sled. Later, an examination would confirm that the magazine was full, and there was no bullet in the chamber. The weapon had not been used. His thermos with cold tea was lying on the sled. There were no signs of a struggle, no disorder. The dogs were frightened, they were hungry, thirsty, and unhappy. It seemed as if their owner had gotten up and vanished into thin air. A ground search operation began. A team of trappers like Jonathan and several rangers combed the area square by square. The first 2 days yielded absolutely nothing. A leading point had fallen through the ice. But engineers who arrived at the scene drilled through the ice for several miles. It was more than 3 feet thick, with no cracks or holes. That theory was ruled out. But even in that case, the man would have fallen off the sled even killed. He couldn't have just disappeared. The strangest was the dogs. The lead dog, named Kai, was known for his calm and confident temperament. Rescuers found him cowering under the sled, whimpering and growling at anyone who tried to approach him. All the dogs showed signs of extreme stress. Something had frightened them very severely. On the third day of the search, one of the trackers, an Athabascan Indian named Joe Whitehorse, strayed almost a mile west of the group's main route, toward a wooded slope. What he found there changed the course of the entire investigation and turned it from a rescue operation into something completely different. These were not tracks. Instead, there were deep furrows in the snow. They were spaced unevenly and unlike anything they had seen before. They were not bear tracks. Grizzlies hibernate at this time of year. They weren't wolf or wolverine tracks either. The grooves were long, narrow, and dug up to 12 inches deep into the snow. It was as if someone had pierced the snow with something long and hard, like crutches. But these crutches left too narrow an imprint. And there weren't just two, but sometimes three or four in a group, as if the creature was leaning on several limbs at once. Joe followed this strange chain of pits. It led up the slope into a thick spruce forest. After a few hundred feet, he found Jonathan's first item, his heavy carpet. It hadn't been taken off neatly. It had been torn at the seams at the back of the shoulders, as if it had been pulled off with incredible force without being uncovered. There wasn't a drop of blood on the fabric, just roughly torn clothing thrown onto the snow. It was becoming evident that Leslie hadn't left of his own accord. The group moved on along the trail. The atmosphere was tense. People walked in silence, gripping their weapons tightly. Strange tracks led them deeper into the forest. And here they began to find other things. A snowshoe broken in half, which had been attached to Jonathan's backpack. The lighter had fallen off. And then they saw blood, a few drops on the skin. And next to them was something that made even the most experienced hunters fascinated. It was a fang, huge, yellowish, about 4 inches long, curved like a dagger. It did not belong to any known predator in North America. It was too thin for a bear and utterly different in shape from a wolf or cougar. It just lay there in the snow, next to the drops of blood that analysis had confirmed belonged to Leslie Jonathan. The search was called at dusk that day. The next day, the operation headquarters received orders from Anchorage. All volunteers from local hunters were ordered to the area. A special team arrived, not from the Park Service. These people were dressed in military gear, kept to themselves, and they made talk to anyone. The official reason was increased avalanche danger in difficult weather conditions. Although the weather was clear, the search was called off after 2 days. Leslie Jonathan was never found. The official conclusion was missing, presumed dead, as a result of an accident in the wild. There was no mention of strange tracks, torn carcass, or a fang found in the final report. The case was closed. We will probably never know what happened to Leslie Jonathan. His name joined the long list of those who disappeared without a trace in the wilds of Alaska. But the story of his disappearance is not just a tragedy. It is a chilling reminder that in the wildest and most untouched corners of our planet, there may be life forms that do not fit into our understanding of biology. Predators that have evolved in complete isolation, and for whom humans are nothing more than prey. And sometimes when humans venture too far, they risk encountering what lies waiting in the permafrost.
Leave them out for service. Here to help you save hundreds by customizing your car insurance with Liberty Mutual. Agent down. Probably should have gone the other way. Only pay?
September 8th, 1987, Olympic National Park, Washington State. A vast, wild area where temperate rainforest meets rocky peaks. The day was clear and warm for early fall, perfect conditions for working outdoors. Martin Krause, a 31-year-old assistant ranger, was precisely the kind of person you'd want to see in a job like this. He was in great shape, meticulous, methodical, and knew these trails like the back of his hand. He wasn't a novice or an adventurer. This was his profession, and he took it very seriously. His task for the day was completely routine, even dull. Check a few abandoned huts and old miners' shacks in the snow-whipped trail area. It was standard procedure before the rainy season began. Make sure the buildings weren't occupied by squatters. Damage